Thank you. John R. MacArthur, in his new book, You Can't Be President, The Outrageous Barriers to Democracy in America, details the numerous obstacles laid down by the two major parties, both of which you're more than well aware of, to prevent insurgents, such as yourselves, or even independents within their own parties, people like Ned Lamott, who challenged Senator Lieberman, or Dennis Kucinich, from achieving power. He argues in the book that these obstacles have become so egregious that we should, as is happening now in Vermont with the Progressive Party, focus on local politics and build up a grassroots movement rather than try and confront the national behemoths. This seems to be working somewhat in Vermont. The Progressive Party now has 6 members in the 150-member Vermont House. It is mounting a credible campaign for governor. Anthony Polina is actually now outpolling the Democratic candidate. And of course, Vermont has elected Bernie Sanders to the Senate. Given the corporate control, which you have both spoken about, of the presidential debates and the electoral process, the fact that you, in many ways, both of you as candidates have been blackballed by the mainstream media, isn't there some validity to Mr. MacArthur's argument that perhaps the best way to break the two-party duopoly is to put all of our energies into fighting things like big box stores or developers or getting on the city council rather than investing time and energy in perhaps what might be termed quixotic campaigns for president? And we'll begin with you, Mr. Nader.
Fine. You know, what are they waiting for? In every locality, they can do that. Now, Vermont is a little bit idiosyncratic in that way. It's rural and small towns, and you can knock on every door. If you try to do that in New York City or Chicago or Los Angeles, it's much more difficult, requires a lot more money, and the two-party or single-party domination of politics there is a real obstacle. But when we campaign around the country, Nader Gonzalez campaign, we ally ourselves with progressive local officials. We ally ourselves with citizens who are fighting injustices around the country, whether it's toxic exposure to children in south central Los Angeles or blowing off mountains by the coal barons in West Virginia, or a whole variety of areas. So we understand it takes both. You have to have a national visibility and a national campaign and show how the national affects the local, and of course the local can show how the local enhances the national. But Anthony Polina, for example, would not appear with me in Vermont. He didn't want to alienate the Democrats and perhaps Bernie Sanders, who he was a staff assistant to. So it sounds good, but we're a long way from developing a national and local agenda that we can all band together on. I mean, when you have people like Chomsky and Zinn, who are basically supporting Obama, who's a warmonger, who is a promoter of bigger military budgets, of foreign invasions and interventions, and who wants to provide more weapon systems and doesn't challenge the military-industrial complex, and is a corporatist to the core. You can see that the left, the liberal, the progressive, have got a lot of work to do.
Mr. Baldwin.
I think if the American people really understood how the political process is being manipulated by the two major parties and by the national media as a whole, and a caveat here to say thank you to you, Chris, and thank you to C-SPAN and AP that's here to cover this debate. If the American people really understood the depths at which they go to manipulate the process, I really believe they would be outraged, and I really believe the American people themselves would change it. They don't really realize what we have to go through just to get on the ballot, the amount of money that it takes and effort that it takes just to get on the ballot. And then, of course, notice that we're not invited to the major debates. And they say, well, you don't poll enough. But then, of course, you look at the fact that we have enough state ballots that we could obtain, theoretically, the necessary 270 electoral votes to win the presidency. Now, that is a huge undertaking. And there's only a few candidates that thus qualify.
6.
Mr. Nader and myself and the others that are not here, 6 in total. And you could put all 6 of those candidates up in front of the American people, let them present their views and their ideas to them, and let the American people decide for themselves the ideas that they thought were best suited for our country's future.
Let's talk specifically about the obstacles that both of you face, so that perhaps the audience can get a sense of the hurdles that Rick MacArthur has detailed in his book. And maybe you could begin, Mr. Nader.
First of all, we face obstacles in raising money. I mean, Obama raises more in one day than our entire campaign, which is going to be run on $4 million. And we about the only way we can raise money is on the internet, votenader.org, for anybody who's interested in contributing, and over live television like C-SPAN. The mails are exorbitantly expensive now to do it that way. We have events around the country where we raise funds. But by and large, it's very difficult. Now, one reason is that people think we can't win. Well, you can't win if you're not on the debates. Every national poll since 2000 have said a majority of the people want Ralph Nader on those debates. And in fact, they're very close to 50% on all the small candidates. Because the people in this country don't look at debates as simply antidotes to insomnia. They want a little broader framework. The second is, just think what we have to do. Jason Kafoury, our coordinator, he came May 20th. We were not on one state. In an incredible pressure cooker summer, we're now on 45 states. But what we had to do is challenge the states with litigation. We had to get a huge number of signatures in a short period of time. In 2004, the Democrats filed 24 lawsuits in 18 states in 12 weeks to get us off ballots like Pennsylvania and Ohio. And it's just a monstrous violation of our civil liberties. No Western country obstructs voters and candidates from participating in elections like the state laws in about half the states. And there's no sensitivity to these Jim Crow type laws against small and independent candidates. No sensitivity by the major media, by the major columnists, by the editorials. You know, they'll flip over when they see gerrymandered districts where one major party doesn't even want to compete with the other. And 90% of the House of Representative districts are one-party districts. As Mr. Baldwin said, people realize they don't even have two choices in most congressional districts, just the incumbent, either Republican or Democrat. But there's a great sensitivity. The New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and others around the country about the civil liberties of candidates. And if you don't have candidate rights, voter rights aren't worth as much because they're not given the choices.
Mr. Baldwin.
And I really think the national media bears much of the blame for this. They are supposed to be the watchdogs on government. They are supposed to be the ones that protect the free debate and the free exchange of ideas. That is their purpose. That is their function. Instead, I think most of the American people that are watching this debate right now would agree when I say that the major media, for the most part, has become pretty much lapdogs for the two major parties. No one else is invited to the dance, not because they don't have ideas that are worth considering, not because they cannot exchange debate and be a part of the process, have something to bring to the table. I think Ron Paul is a classic example of this in the Republican, Dennis Kucinich in the Democrat side. I mean, these guys were treated like they had the plague by members of their own party. The national media, until Ron Paul started breaking in $20-something million, until he did that, he was virtually unknown by the major media. And again, it seems to be a definite, determined effort on behalf of the two major parties in concert with the national media to keep third-party expression out of the debate. And I really think it's up to the American people at some point. Everything comes back to we the people, doesn't it, Chris? I mean, at some point it always comes back to we the people. And I would hope that people that are listening and watching this debate would realize the significance of this and how their fundamental freedoms are being denied them by not allowing third parties to participate in the free exchange of ideas.